Welcome to the Global Roundtable. This series focuses on the future of economic competition. I'm Parag Khanna, joined by a very distinguished panel, including Dambisa Moyo, Daniel Altman, and Anand, Giridharadas. Today's topic is actually the power of language. We can't be complacent anymore in the West about controlling the financial levers of the economy, but what about controlling the language of the global economy, which is, of course, English? What's the future of that advantage for the West?
It's interesting. English is no longer an instrument of soft power in the way that I think a lot of Americans assume it is. It's purely an instrument. It is an instrument for the people who learn it to get ahead. And I think we still have a residual Cold War idea that every time someone learns English, they like us more, they like democracy more, they like our policies. There's a whole number of people in the world today who are learning English as a tool for getting their next promotion, who still need to be convinced about our values and ideas.
But doesn't it still matter to be better at English?
I think there's an economic advantage, but it's not necessarily in the quality. Think about education in general. When babies are born, they're born with as much education today as they were born with 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And yet you need so much more education to get ahead in the global economy today. Not having to spend extra time learning English is an advantage that American babies have. It may not be a big advantage, but maybe it's a couple years that they can study something else, if only we would devote more time to something else.
I think that's exactly right, because they aren't, unfortunately, there isn't this crowding out trade-off. It's not the fact that Americans are not spending time learning English doesn't mean they're not spending time doing maths and science. And if you look at the international organization, the OECD's PISA survey every year, the fact of the matter is that Americans are underperforming in mathematics, in sciences, but also in reading. So, I mean, you have to then ask yourself, well, what exactly is going on?
Even Chinese are learning English in record numbers before, during, and now after the Olympic Games, which they played host to. Could it really be that countries that are not even native English speaking, such as China and others, will actually disintermediate the Western sort of grip on English in terms of jobs?
To disagree with Dan a bit, if you think about the US or England, the UK, a certain number of people within those countries speaks a kind of English that is globally competitive in the kind of language of global business. But most Americans and most people in Britain don't speak an English that gets them a job at Citibank tomorrow anyway. So I think we can overblow the number of people who speak the kind of English we're talking about as the language of global business, even within English-speaking countries.
I think if you make that distinction, though, you start to bring in other cultural factors. There may not be people in India or China, which we are viewing as these big threats to American dominance, who are learning the right mindset to work at Citibank. So, we might as well throw these other factors into the mix as well.
Even across African countries, people are learning Chinese. And I think there's something to be said there, because governments in Africa, places like Cameroon, are actually devoting relatively scarce resources to learning Chinese over English. So we have to ask what this trend really means.
But I have to ask whether a world where English and Chinese are the global languages is not a world that's worse off, where there's one global language, one standard that everybody can use. Isn't that an economic efficiency by itself?
But I don't think we'll ever be able to force a standardization. So we have to come to grips with the fact that there are now multiple global languages, English and Chinese and potentially others. And beyond that, English itself isn't the only language, because, as you said earlier, we have to also know math and science, and those are in a way more universal than English itself. But certainly language and how we define it and use it is going to be integral to the future of competition in the global economy. Thanks very much for your insights. More on that and other relevant topics at bigthink.com.